Great. All right, it's 9:01 at this point, and I would like to bring to order the meeting on March 23rd, 2022. At this point, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Janet, can you do the roll call?
Sure. Commissioner Gupta?
Here.
Commissioner Hanson?
Here.
Commissioner Ketchum?
Here.
Commissioner Chair Ramirez?
Here.
And staff is represented by Osasa and Montes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next we have oral communications. At this point, Janet will advise the public on how they may participate during the public comment.
Thank you, Chair. For those attending the meeting on the Zoom video conference, we will use the raised hand feature in order to organize any public comments during the general public comment period. And for each item on the regular agenda, I will ask those members of the public who wish to comment to click the raised hand feature to raise your hand to speak on that agenda item. For those joining by phone, please press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. Please note that members of the public must wait for my prompt in connection with each agenda item before using the raised hand function. For example, you cannot raise your hand at the beginning of the meeting for an agenda item that is later in the meeting. When you hear your name called, I will prompt you to unmute your microphone and begin speaking. At this time, for items not on the agenda, public comment, I did not receive any written comment and there are no hands raised at this time, Chair.
Okay, seeing that there's no one that wants to participate on this item, I'm going to close public participation at this time, unless there's an objection. And with that, I would like to move to consent agenda. We have two items, but we're postponing the meetings for the meeting of March 9th. So we only have one item. Do I have a motion for the consent agenda? Unless anybody wants to pull it off.
I move
Go ahead.
that we approve the consent agenda number 2.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Janet, can you do a roll call?
Commissioner Gupta,
Yes.
Commissioner Hanson,
Aye.
Commissioner Ketchum,
Aye.
Chair Ramirez.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Motion passes unanimously. So next we are moving to the regular agenda. We have item number 3. Janet, can you read it for the record?
Yes, we have item number 3. It's a presentation about the Potomac County's ongoing 2023-2031 general plan housing element update given by Will Gibson. And we have him on right now. Take it away, Will.
Thank you, Janet. Good morning, commissioners. Good morning, staff. As Janet said, this is just an informational briefing on the ongoing update to the county's housing element of the general plan. We're not presenting much of the content of the updated housing element at this point, but because it's been about 7 years since the housing element was before you for the last update, it's more of an overview of the contents of the housing element, the requirements of the update, where we are in the process, the next steps, and when you will see content coming before you. So let me just share my screen. All right, and you should be seeing the PowerPoint now. So I'm just going to briefly go through an overview very quickly of what is the housing element, the various components that are included in it by law, including housing conditions and needs, constraints to housing production, the regional housing needs allocation and the sites inventory, and goals, policies, and programs, those two being the most important components. New requirements for this housing element cycle, the process and the timeline for the update, what we have done and will be doing for outreach and participation, and then some additional information, and then answer any questions that you may have. So what is the housing element? The housing element is a plan, basically a plan for the housing needed in a given jurisdiction or community. It is part of the county's general plan, and it's required by state law. And unlike some other components of the general plan, the requirements for what may be in the housing element, what have to be in the housing element, how we address and assess the components and the various analyses that go into it are very stringently mandated by state law, and each housing element cycle that we go through, they become more stringently mandated by state law. So, so we are under very specific guidance on how we draft the housing element and how we present it to the state for certification. The housing element assesses current and future housing needs. It includes housing policies and programs to address those needs, and it must be updated on a schedule that is now every 8 years, which is called the housing element cycle. Previously, it was a 7-year cycle, but the state changed the timeline so that it would align with some other state funding programs. So we are now on a cycle that will be 2023 to 2031. So our update is ongoing now, and we should have adoption and certification by the state by 2023. And the update schedule is by region. So all of the major area jurisdictions are on the same schedule. Other regions of the state are on different schedules, so they are staggered. And the county housing element is for the unincorporated county only. So each city also has its own housing element. And again, all the Bay Area jurisdictions are working at the same time on their housing elements. So just turning to the components quickly. So again, it must have an assessment of housing conditions and needs, an evaluation of constraints of various kinds to housing production, an analysis of our existing housing element, the policies and programs in it, and how effective they were, identification, most importantly, of sites to meet our housing needs, which includes the sites inventory, which must address our regional housing needs allocation. And then it must have a housing plan with goals, policies, and programs and quantified objectives to meet both the regional housing needs allocation and the needs we have assessed through the housing element process. So housing conditions and needs, it basically is demographic and economic analysis, population change, where and how are people living now, what kinds of housing units do we have in the county, the household types and the sizes, incomes, poverty rates, housing costs, and then of course we take community input. What is the community feeling? How are they experiencing their housing needs, and how are their housing needs being met? And all of that analysis goes into what kind of policies and programs should we adopt to try to address the needs that we are finding in the community. And so we look at things, and this is just a basic overview of some of the data that go into the housing element, but you're seeing here population growth 1990 to 2020 in terms of change for the Bay Area as a whole, and for San Mateo County and the unincorporated county in green at the bottom. You can see there's a dip after the 2008 recession, and then a steep climb again. And then there's a little bit of a dip in the unincorporated county in particular, but that was a COVID-related, pandemic-related dip in population that has since probably stabilized and started to come back. This was captured in 2020, so we will have some data that shows later years as well. Similarly, unemployment rates here, Bay Area, county, and unincorporated. And again, you see on this graph, you would see unemployment rates spiking during the pandemic. They have since stabilized and actually come down significantly. So, so where you choose to cut off the data points makes a pretty large difference in the story that is being told here. Household income level by tenure. We'll look at data such as this. As you can see, for the higher income levels, the vast majority of people are living in ownership households, whereas that changes as you move further down the income scale. And then housing unit types in 2010 and 2020. And for the unincorporated county, as has long been the case, our predominant form of housing is single family detached, vastly dwarfing all of the other kinds of housing that we have. So those are just some snapshot examples of the kind of assessment that would go into seeing what kind of housing do we have and what kind of needs are out there that are not being met. Turning to constraints to housing production, we would look at regulatory constraints such as our zoning regulations, our permit fees, our permit processing times, design standards and other standards, and assess how are those constraining the production of housing? Do they slow it down? Do they make it difficult? Do they make it costly? Looking at environmental factors such as sensitive habitats, flood zones, seismic hazards, all of the other environmental factors that may preclude the development of housing in given areas or of certain types. Infrastructure constraints, water, sewer, roads, other factors that are necessary for the production of housing, and then a variety of what other constraints we can determine may be preventing housing from being produced both overall and in specific areas. And then turning to the sites inventory. So again, arguably the sites inventory and the policies and programs are the most crucial parts of the housing element and the parts that will also receive most scrutiny from the state. And the sites inventory is an inventory of all developable and redevelopable sites that are available for housing production sufficient to meet the county's regional housing needs allocation, or RHNA. And the RHNA is the amount of the housing needed in San Mateo County over the next 8 years, as determined both by the state and then subsequently by the Association of Bay Area Governments, or ABAG. So the state determines our regional share of the state's total housing need over the next 8 years. Then ABAG takes that and they allocate that share among all the Bay Area jurisdictions, and the county's portion of that share is our RHNA. And the housing element must identify enough realistically developable sites to match that number. And so a little more about how that works. So the RHNA methodology is developed by ABAG following parameters laid down by state law. They make growth and development projections for all the counties and the cities in the Bay Area, and they make assumptions about where growth will happen as well. So the current RHNA for us assumes that most growth for the region as a whole assumes that most growth is happening and will happen in urbanized area, significant growth in our unincorporated urbanized areas, including North Fair Oaks and others. So that is how our RHNA is determined, but that does not mean we necessarily have to adopt growth and development patterns that precisely match where they think development is going to happen. And just to show our RHNA from the last cycle, so you see the RHNA 5, which is the 2014-2022 in the second column here. We had a total of 913 units that that ABAG determined we needed to plan for and develop over that 7-year cycle. To date, this is actually more from the middle of the end of last year. We were at about 551 units built, and they are broken down, as you can see, by income category as well. We're further than that now, and I actually think for the top line here, we may actually achieve that 913. We probably will not achieve it for the income categories separately, but we may meet the total amount. We typically in the county have far more above moderate development than we do other kinds of lower income development. So turning to the RHNA for this cycle, as you can see, the RHNA 5 allocation again in the second column, the RHNA 6 allocation for the next 8 years is significantly higher. So now we have a mandate to plan for 2,833 units. So it's a very large increase, and it's an increase, as you can see, across each income category as well. The most significant being the lowest income categories. So that is what we have to determine we have sufficient sites for that are feasibly and realistically developable, and that is what we do through the sites inventory. So the sites inventory must assess all of the sites that are available for housing production. It may include vacant sites. It may include potentially redevelopable sites if we can justify the assumption that they are redevelopable. They must be developable in the time frame that we are looking at for the housing element. And we have to look at the various constraints that would keep that from happening, be they infrastructure, market conditions, or whatever factors may impact the developability of a site. And if there are insufficient sites to meet the RHNA, the county must commit to creating more sites. And typically the way that happens is by committing to rezoning for residential or denser residential developments in areas where residential may not be allowed, or where it may be low density and we can increase the density. We have not determined yet whether that will be needed. We are in the process of assessing the sites inventory now, so we may or may not have to commit to a rezoning program to change our developability in particular areas. But I would say that given the amount of increase for this cycle, even if we are able to meet our RENA through available sites for this cycle, it's unlikely that we'll be able to do so without rezoning in future cycles. And so the sites inventory then becomes a set of both maps in the housing element. And here's an example from the current housing element, showing the locations of each parcel that we've assessed as developable. And then it also becomes an inventory showing each parcel on a list with the conditions that apply to it, the developability assumptions, and the capacity. And new in this cycle, the state is requiring this inventory to be by assessor's parcel number, but we've been doing that for several housing element cycles, so it's not new, but the state just prefers to see it by APN now, and apparently not every jurisdiction has been doing that. So that covers the sites inventory, just in brief. Turning to the goals, policies, and programs. So the housing element must contain a set of goals. These are examples of the type of goals that go into our housing element: incentivizing and facilitating housing that's affordable for all residents at all income levels, allowing residents to live near their work, ensuring that all housing is safe and habitable, obviously meeting our mandated RENA targets, furthering fair housing goals, and of course responding to the community's needs as well. And there are more in our current housing element, but these are examples of the types of goals that we can craft and adopt as part of the housing element update. And then it must include policies and programs that meet both the RENA and the needs that we have assessed through the housing element process. And so those policies and programs are specific actions intended to address our housing needs with objective targets. And some of those from our current housing element include the housing impact fee, which we committed to in the prior housing element, and we did adopt. So we now have an impact fee on both residential and commercial development that is put into a trust fund to fund affordable housing. We committed to update our accessory dwelling unit regulations to make those regulations more generous for the production of ADUs. And we did so, although we were also mandated multiple times by the state to do so. So we had some help in enforcing that program along. We committed to expanding mobile home park protections, and we did adopt both new mobile home park zoning districts to allow those sites to continue as mobile homes, and also a whole set of rent control and conversion prohibition protections. We committed to expanding our multifamily residential health and safety inspections. So our health department inspects multifamily units for health and safety. We expanded that program and made it more frequent and more robust. And we also concluded several phases of rezoning to advance implementation of the Northrooks Community Plan. So those are some examples of the policies and programs that were in the prior housing element that were completed. Similarly, we will be adopting a whole suite of policies and programs for the future housing element that will commit us to similar actions. So when we look at the policies and programs, we look at how have housing needs changed from the prior cycle, how have other conditions changed. We obviously look at what sites are available and how we should address those. What are the policies and programs that are needed to address those new or changing housing needs? How do we address our RENA shortfall if that's a requirement? Are our current sites sufficient? And then we assess the effectiveness and the necessity of the prior programs from the past housing element, and we determine, are they complete? Are they effective? Should we continue them? Should we discontinue them? And then, of course, what new programs are required? So turning to just some of the new requirements that the state has imposed in cycle 6. Obviously, we have a significantly larger regional housing needs allocation, which poses some real challenges on demonstrating that we do have developable sites. In addition to the large arena, there are also much stricter requirements for how we analyze developability and how we demonstrate the assumptions that we've made. So that presents a challenge as well. There's also arena progress requirement now, which says previously we would simply say, here are developable sites for this next 8-year cycle. We have met our arena. We'll come back in 8 years, and we report our progress to the state, but there are no consequences if we are in the short term or in the midterm during that housing element cycle. If we're not producing enough housing to meet what we have planned for in the sites inventory, there were never any penalties for that. Now, as we report midstream and we are falling short of the production that we have targeted with our sites inventory to meet the RENA, the state is going to require us to make policy changes to address them between housing element cycles. So this is entirely new, and it's going to present a challenge as well, because we'll have to revisit the housing element in a way that we had not previously had to do. And then finally, there is a much more robust requirement for how we assess and address fair housing. So we must do a really substantial analysis of the fair housing implications of our programs, of the housing conditions in the county, how our development patterns affect the equitable provision of housing for all segments of the community. So just briefly, here's the update process timeline. We have been doing community outreach. We've been doing work, obviously, on updating all of the components of the housing element, working on the sites inventory, working on a draft of the document itself. We hope to have a draft, certainly have draft components, but a whole draft available in the next few months. Then we move on to public hearings with the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors, and then we would finally have the housing element adopted. This says January 2023. We hope to have adoption and submittal to the state far in advance of that. What we have been advised by consultants and by other jurisdictions who have gone through the process in prior cycles is that the state is taking a very long time to review, and we need to get it to them fairly early to give them time to actually achieve certification of the housing element by the January 2023 date, or by the grace period, which is about 3 months after that. So we are trying to back it up as much as we can before the January 2023. So key review stages, we hope to have the sites inventory available for public review in late April or early May. The same with the policies and programs, and then a full draft by May and June. We would target Planning Commission hearings before you for your review and recommendation in July of 2022, and then Board of Supervisors hearings following that in July and August. If we achieve that schedule, we can submit to the state in August and give them plenty of lead time to review it. What happens in that case is the state may accept it as is. They may recommend modifications. There may be a back and forth. We may have to come back to the Planning Commission and to the board if the changes are significant enough, and then resubmit to the state. So there's an amendment process that happens. So the more lead time that we can achieve, the greater chance we have of being able to amend in time and go back to the state for certification. In terms of the outreach and participation we've been doing and will continue to do, we've held multiple countywide public and stakeholder forums. We have held meetings and hearings with the North Forks Community Council on multiple occasions. We are hoping to have meetings at the Midcoast Community Council and Pescadero Municipal Advisory Council as well. We have had meetings with various community groups, including Sustainable Pescadero. We've distributed one online survey for housing needs, and we will be distributing another one after draft components of the housing element are available. We have been receiving direct outreach to and input from stakeholders, advocates, and residents. We've promulgated various online materials. There is an email notification list about the housing element update. And then, of course, we will have the review and adoption hearings, which will be public hearings. And it's important to note, we've been working strongly with partners. The housing department has been a significant contributor to this effort in reviewing the policies and programs and offering policies and programs in particular, but in reviewing and helping to update all of the components of the housing element. The Office of Sustainability has contributed. Our Environmental Health Department has contributed, particularly around farm labor housing issues. Office of Community Affairs has helped with outreach to the community. And then we have been sharing a consultant across multiple jurisdictions, Baird and Driscoll, who run our 21 Elements multiple jurisdiction collaborative, and they have offered significant assistance, technical help. And then in this cycle, the Association of Bay Area Governments has actually offered a lot of direct technical assistance, which was not previously available in prior housing element cycles. So we have been doing this with a lot of assistance from a lot of parties. And here, just a little bit of additional information. Our county housing element update website is here, and there is sign up for the mailing list there. The first survey is still available, both in English and Spanish. And then there's also a multi-jurisdictional housing element collaboration website, which presents information on the collaboration across jurisdictions through the consultant that we are sharing. With that, that concludes my presentation, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Will. Any questions for commissioners? I'll start with Commissioner Gupta.
Thank you for your presentation, Will. There's a lot of information here to digest. From what I read, what was there on as part of our, I would call it package, plus all the links, plus what you presented, plus as we keep peeling the onion, so to say. So there's a lot of information, and there's a lot more that I don't think I got to it, right? So it's an ongoing process. And some of the questions I have is, you are tapping on, by you, I don't mean you, but the county and the government is tapping on same set of resources here, right? You showed all those partners there. So unincorporated area is primarily being handled by the county government. Then there are the cities. So how do they kind of stagger the timing so that they can make so that they have enough resources to continue this is an ongoing process. It's not, we call it a 7-year cycle or an 8-year cycle, but it's going on all the time. It's not that you do it one time and then you don't do anything for 7 years.
So yes, to a certain extent, yes, and probably to a greater extent this cycle than in prior cycles. So we adopt the housing element itself one time at the beginning of each cycle. So we must update and adopt the housing element and send it to the state, and they will certify whether it's legally valid. And that will happen ideally by January 2023. And then the housing element itself is fundamentally fixed for that 8-year cycle, unless we are not meeting our housing goals, in which case we may have to make changes to the housing element, or we may have to adopt other policies that help us to address those goals. But the adoption process itself will be complete, but the implementation of the programs and policies in the housing element are ongoing throughout the cycle. So we adopt the housing, essentially a housing plan with policies and programs. That adoption is completed. Ideally, the state certifies it, it's legal, and then we go on and pursue all of the policies that we have committed to try to address our housing needs. And those do continue throughout the 8-year cycle. So that in that sense, it is ongoing and it is continuous. And for the past cycle, the past 7-year cycle, as I showed, I showed a very small array of the policies and programs that we have achieved from that last 7-year cycle, but those were ongoing. They were achieved at various points. Some of them we've only just completed toward the end of the cycle. Some were very early. So the work does just simply continue. You're correct on that score.
Continue, okay. So you had mentioned that you had one slide there saying that I think it was 900 some units for the RH for the RENA 5 allocation, 900 some units. So you said roughly those were, I would call them implemented, right? Those are there. You are muted, Will.
My apologies.
Yeah, right, this one.
Yeah, so you see the column for RENA 5. This was what the state said was what we needed to plan for over the 7 years from 2014 to 2022. So we had to show that we had enough sufficient developable sites to meet that 913 number, and we did. And then the next column shows you the progress as of toward the end of last year. I don't remember exactly which month was the final month of this assessment, but so this shows our progress toward building that many, and we were at that point 362 units short. I think we will be much closer. We're much closer at this point, and I think by the time the cycle ends, which is the end of this year, we'll be even closer. Whether we meet it exactly is not entirely clear, but we certainly will have made significant progress toward it. The difference this cycle, so even if we have been behind throughout that 7-year period, we report to the state every year on how many units we have produced and how close we are to meeting this. And the state inventories all that. There's a website on the Department of Housing and Community Development, the state level, that shows every single jurisdiction and how close they are to meeting this number. We have been behind throughout the cycle, and we remain behind, although we may come much closer or even achieve it. There was no real penalty for that in the past. We were simply behind. At this point, the state has changed the requirements so that if we lag consistently throughout the upcoming cycle behind the much larger number of units that we have here, then we may have to adopt new programs mid-cycle to try to address the fact that we're not meeting those numbers. So that's the new requirement, and we actually it's not entirely clear how that will play out, but it's definitely different in that if we were behind in the past, we were simply behind. It's unfortunate. It helps us assess where we are. It helps us assess where we want to make changes, but the state didn't impose any requirements on us. Now they will.
So are state requirements also on this same cycle?
Yes. So
it's not that they get mid 8 years or 7 years that they could change the requirements. Is that correct?
In law, most likely, it is very unlikely that it's unlikely the state will come back and say, well, now they won't change the numbers. The numbers will definitely not change. And it's unlikely that they're going to adopt policies that change how we address the numbers as well. But on the other hand, the state does continually impose new requirements about housing in general on us. For instance, we presented SB 9 to the commission recently. Right. That kind of new policy and new program will probably continue to come from the state on an annual basis, and it may help us address our housing needs in certain ways. So we anticipate seeing that, but it doesn't directly change what's in this housing element requirement.
Okay, so I'm glad you led me into SB 9. So is SB 9 a kind of a result of need for more housing?
Yes, so the state sees SB 9 as a way to facilitate the production of housing on single family parcels that would normally allow only one lot. So, okay. And it's an open question how we are allowed to assume and project SB9 development to meet our housing element goals. It seems like we can assume some SB9 development and say, we see these parcels as potentially developing further. We think that will help us meet our RENA, but the methodology we're allowed to use is unclear at this point.
Okay. This is just a short question, is census data taken into account in this?
Census data is a crucial part of how we do the assessment of housing needs and conditions.
Okay.
So all of the population trends, all of the information on how people are living, what size the housing units are, what type of housing units they are, when were housing units built, how much rent are people paying, what is the ratio of rent to income, all of the conditions that you would look at to say, you know, how much are people struggling with housing costs, with housing conditions, are the needs being matched by the type of housing that's out there. That all comes almost exclusively from census data. Unfortunately, the 2020 census data, which is the best and most robust census data that is possible to have, is not released yet. We have data from what's called the American Community Survey, which is a rolling 5-year sampling survey, which has very good data, but it's not as good as 2020. And I think at this point, we are not going to get the 2020 census data in time to incorporate it into the housing element. So we're using the 2019 American Community Survey data, which provides the information we need, but it's just not quite as accurate because the 2020 data is a 100% survey.
Will,
Survey, it asks everyone the questions.
Will,
Yes.
I think you're gonna have to repeat the last maybe a small segment because you cut out.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is just kind of a technical point that the best available data is the US Census full census data, which goes to every household and asks every household the questions. The American Community Survey is a sampling survey, which takes small groups and extrapolates them to the larger population. We have the 2019 American Community Survey data. We are not going to get the 2020 census data in time to use it for the housing element, which is unfortunate because it's the best data there is. But it's just incredible. For a lot of reasons, some of them political, that was heavily delayed.
Okay. And I have many more questions, but I have one last question. I want other commissioners to get their questions. I was reading that it says there's a criteria to determine or to assess fair housing.
Yes.
What does that mean? That it's fair housing for
So
people?
it means that housing is equitably distributed or not discriminating across race or class or disability status or all of the other categories that make people vulnerable to being in housing conditions that may be subpar or maybe unaffordable. So we have to look at, are we providing housing fairly to all segments of community regardless?
Oh, Will,
You are frozen again.
you froze again, Will.
Regardless of their
let's see.
socioeconomic, their rate.
Will-
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Good. I'm sorry. Yes, my internet seems to be a little unstable, which is unusual, but okay. Just keep letting me know, please. So we have to assess what kind of disparate impacts are affecting communities based on their socioeconomic status, their racial and ethnic status, their gender status, their disability status, all of the characteristics that may lead to people suffering from discrimination in housing, from subpar housing conditions. Is the distribution of where housing is, the type that's available, the cost, what is being produced, our policies and programs, how do they affect that fair provision of housing to everyone in the community? That's the assessment that we undertake. And in this case, there is a consultant that specifically is working on that for us. They did a very in-depth analysis for every jurisdiction in the county. And that report, which is substantial, will be an appendix in the housing element itself. And then it will also affect the policies and programs that we incorporate in the housing element to make sure the needs and the disparities identified in that report are addressed in our policies and programs.
And with all this awareness of equity going on, has that added more criteria?
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely. That, in fact, has directly driven the state's increased requirements and stringency about how we address that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Will.
Thank you, Ms. Gupta. I will call on Mr. Hanson.
Morning, Will, and thank you for a nice write-up. I've been following this issue for at least 20 years. And you know, my conclusion, particularly after I read yours, was how the state is basically passive aggressive. You know, we say one things, but our actions and what we want is a different thing. And, you know, basically, you know, we think in terms of the Bayside as being suburbs, and the state really wants it to be urbanized, making it look like London, you know. It's, and I think it would be easier for us to deal and acknowledge where they really want us to be instead of playing this dance we have for 20 years around words. It is that we're in an urban environment. We want you to be more urbanized, and in such plan it as an urban landscape. Plays out differently in the coast side. So I'm just really, for the most part, talking about the Bayside in this moment. I mean, I think really that's what the state is thinking too, interpreting their actions for 20 years. And so I'm thinking, you know, we talk about restraints, and the restraints, one of them is infrastructures and traffic. And the way we've always planned it is for a suburb. And we've only looked for it being in the same length of time period as the housing. And really, the transportation and traffic and things like that need to be leading it. It needs to be 5, 10 years in front of housing, you know, because what really matters to everybody who's going to live in this changed environment is the quality of life. And the state says we're going to get denser whether we like it or not. And we're going to hate it, and a reaction is going to come down the road unless we plan to make the quality of life as good or better going forward. So I think one of the problems and challenges and thinkings for the housing development is how do we get those barriers out of the way, improve the quality of life. And that's really going to have to be the infrastructure first, and get the traffic. You know, the state wants us to look like this, because one of the problems I had, some projects I thought were very good projects, was we were really spot zoning denser areas and in places that was a suburban neighborhood that doesn't move traffic. And that just makes other people back up and say, I don't want this. I bought into a suburban neighborhood myself. You know, I want my neighborhood to look like it does when I bought it. I understand that. The state says, well, yeah, my neighbors now can do ADUs, and we could do lot splits. We could do all sorts of stuff now that never was a consideration. So to keep the quality of life, so I can at least embrace this and not fight it all the time, is make sure that the transportation issues and those things are addressed simultaneously, and instead of being reactive. We talked about traffic signals degrading, getting down to D or F. we know they're going to get there if we do this build out. So what are we going to do proactively so we don't get to that point? And I think that's the real crux of this housing element is we need to really, really abandon the suburban idea and move forward. And that's my 10 cents. Inflation used to be 2 cents.
Great. Thank you, Fred. Ms. Ketchum?
Yes, thank you. Then thank you for your presentation. And could you post the slides on the meeting page so we can refer to them? That would be great. Just curious, you used the term, well, I've heard this before, redevelopable. And so presumably that's a parcel that's already developed. So how do you determine whether a developed parcel is redevelopable? I mean, at what stage of decrepitude does it have to be, or what is this?
So that's an excellent question. So there are a variety of methods. So you can look at what is on the site now and what kind of market conditions are going on in adjacent sites. Has redevelopment taken place for similar sites that would make it seem like the market does want to redevelop? You can look at the value of the land underneath whatever is built versus the value of what's on it. And if that disparity is very large, say the value of the land itself is very significant, but the value of the improvements on it, the development on it is very low, that often indicates that that is a site that is ripe for redevelopment because of the disparity between what might be built on it and what's on it in this particular moment. There are some other criteria as well. Basically, you have to take kind of an array of methods to look at it, but we often look at the trends in a particular area and say, okay, you know, this site was a warehouse, or this site was a storage yard and it became multifamily housing. We think similar sites in the same area will do the same. Or we will look at this site is actually zoned for residential high density, but it has it may have some kind of other facility on it, and the value, if it's redeveloped, is far greater than what it is now. And so the market pressures are kind of driving that redevelopment. So you look at economic factors, you look at the value of the land versus the value of the construction on it, and that ratio. You look at trends. So there's a variety of ways. It is not a precise science. You don't know what actually will develop because you can't know what developers are exactly going to want to do at any given moment, but we have to kind of project in general forward.
Thank you. That's helpful. And how is the housing production progress assessed? Is this a building permit is issued or finalized? Well, so I see your nod. So then if there's not enough private development, is the state going to require the county to build this housing?
They have never done so in the past, and there's no requirement for that now. And that doesn't seem to be something that the state is likely to do. It seems that they prefer to rely more on private development, and they fund nonprofit affordable housing developers as well. So the state is directly trying to incentivize that form of development, as is our housing department. Yeah, it's an interesting disconnect, because we can plan for and identify sites for housing, but in general, we don't build housing ourselves. And there are actually quite a few constraints in California on governments doing so. It's a rarity in California that governments directly build housing. It used to be more common that the federal government would build housing, or the state or the county. It does not happen very often now. So what we are doing is we're being required to set the stage and then try to incentivize private developers, and to a certain extent hope that it happens. But yes, going back, we report building permits to the state and final certificates of occupancy as well. But what they look at in terms of progress is how many building permits were issued. But yes, I think you've identified something that is an interesting disconnect, is if that gap is not closed and we've adopted all the policies we can and we've zoned all the land that we can, what happens then?
Okay, thanks. That's it from me.
Thank you, Will. And I think most of the questions I was going to ask have been answered by some of the questions that came up. If anything, I'm just going to make a comment. So it sounds that at some point, once this gets approved, and if we're not meeting our quotas of what is mandated, we may have to revisit, because we may have to come up with some ideas on how to incentivize some of that housing to happen, right? That's what I'm understanding here. That if along the way you're way below, and the state is demanding that you need to provide a certain amount, and you're way below, we're gonna have to rethink the strategy of how we incentivize that building, that housing to happen. But I think, which is interesting, because in the past I've always looked at, the way we did it before, where you identified all the inventory that is out there, but that was the extent of it. You basically didn't have to do anything, just leave it alone and hope that it happens, right? So it's interesting that the new element that the state is putting into this now, this go around, where basically they're demanding that you do something to make sure that it actually happens. So it's going to be, I find it interesting as to what actually happens here in the next 8 years as we go through it. Anyway, that is my comment. I don't know if you want to add more to that.
I would simply agree. It's new. It's a significant change, and I don't think any of us in any of the jurisdictions know exactly how it's going to play out. And so it will be an interesting change going forward. I think you've hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, actually, so one quick question. So the entire county, has a requirement, including the cities within the county. So do we have to go submit basically together with the cities, or each city has to do it on its own?
Each city, so it happens in our case that we happen to be collaborating with a number of the cities to share technical expertise and to share best practices. That does not happen in every case. We have kind of a really beneficial model here, which called 21 Elements, which I've spoken to. I think you guys have heard quite a bit about, where we collaborate and share work and share expertise across jurisdictions, but every jurisdiction has responsibility for its own housing element and must submit it and get approval for it individually. So we help each other out in the process of determining what works best and trying to determine how we proceed with this. But when it comes to submittal, we will all be on different timelines. We'll be submitting at different times. We'll be getting our comments and review from the state differently and going through the process on our own.
Yeah, I was just wondering, that thinking that if it's a county mandate for the entire area, that basically that everybody had to come together and kind of come up with their with the plan at the same time. But I'm sure, as you say, I mean, there's a time limit that everybody has to meet. So I guess everybody knows. Anyway, that's, I don't have any more questions.
I had a question.
Oh, yeah.
Chair.
Sure. Yeah.
Just a follow-up on what Commissioner Ketchum mentioned about permits. What percentage of permits don't go to fruition?
Oh, that's an excellent question. I don't know that. So we do report that to the state as well. So we report how many permits were issued, and then we report how many permits actually do go to fruition. So I could look back into that data and determine what the disparity is, but I don't know offhand. But it's a very good point that, once the permit is issued, it's kind of out of our control whether it gets completed. That is in the hands of the developer at that point. And there is a drop off. There's a disparity there. A lot of permits don't go to completion.
Right.
Although I do think, in fairness, we can only control, I mean, to a certain extent, we can only control the fact that we have the sites that are developable. But they only look at, have we issued enough permits to judge whether we're making progress.
Okay, yeah, just curiosity
Yeah.
more than anything else.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bill.
Certainly.
Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you. Let's open it for public comments at this time. Janet, is there anyone that wants to participate?
Thank you, Chair. We're now opening public comment for item number 3, the general plan housing element update. If your hand is raised, your name will be called. I do see one hand raised from Ms. Janet Davis. Ms. Davis, give me 1 second while I pull up my timer. Okay, David, please accept this invitation, unmute your microphone and begin speaking. Go ahead. Ms. Davis?
Mrs. Davis, you can start talking now.
She's unmuted.
Yeah. I wonder if her volume is down or. Mrs. Davis, can you hear us? Is she the only one at the moment?
She is the only one. Let me see, let's. Let's try one more time. Let's see.
Yeah.
Computer and ask to unmute. Ms. Davis, can you hear us now?
Mrs. Davis, it's your time, your turn to speak. Can you hear us? And you can start talking at any time.
Nothing.
Okay.
I say we maybe come back if she tries again.
Well,
She
yeah.
had a written comment she would like to share with us after she can send it into the commission.
Yeah, I think we should give that opportunity. Well, if there's no more participants, I think we should probably close public participation. I would like to close or make the motion. If anyone can make the motion to close public participation at this time.
Ms. Davis raised her hand again.
Yeah.
She may have solved her audio issue.
Yeah, let's
so
try
you
one
can
more
try
time.
again.
Yeah.
Ms. Davis, can you hear us?
I think you have her muted.
I just unmuted her.
I think she might be muted on her end.
Yeah, well, I keep asking her to unmute, but she does have to unmute herself. There, okay, let's see. Ms. Davis, can you hear us now?
Mrs. Davis, is your turn to speak.
Mm-mm.
Okay. All right, then I would like to see if we have a motion to close public participation at this time.
So move.
All right, we have a motion and second.
I second.
We have a motion and second. Janet, do a roll call, please.
Commissioner Gupta,
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson,
Aye.
Commissioner Ketchum,
Aye.
Chair Ramirez.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, motion carries unanimously. So public comment is now closed for item number 3. Is there any more anything else that the commissioners want to add to this, or? Seeing none, then
No.
I'm gonna say, did I hear someone? No. Okay, with that, then I'm gonna say, Will, thank you very much for your presentation. I look forward to seeing the whole draft and you coming back to get our input on all of that. So thank you very much. With that, then we're gonna move to item number 4. Janet, please read it for the record.
We're now moving on to item number 4, a briefing on the 2022-2023 long range work program by Planning Service Manager Melissa Ross. Go ahead.
Good morning, commissioners and staff. Let me share my screen for the presentation. Okay, and I'm hoping you can all see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So good morning. My name is Melissa Ross, Planning Services Manager for the Planning and Building Department. And I'd like to present the long-range planning work plan for the 2022-2023 calendar year. And let me see if I can get into presentation mode here. There we go. And so the work plan reflects the Board of Supervisors, county managers, and community development directors, policy priorities, as well as state mandates. And the topics to discuss with you this morning include the long-range planning team and our programs and projects, including our accomplishments, state mandated, county directives, ongoing and future. So before I dive into our programs, I want to acknowledge the long-range planning team for their continued efforts, their professionalism and expertise on the various programs. We have Chanda Singh, who's our senior transportation planner managing our transportation-related programs. Will Gibson, who is focusing on our housing programs in North Fair Oaks community plan. Katie Faulkner, who is focused on the hazard mitigation as well as other projects. And Dan Krug is our county arborist and urban forester shared with the Parks Department that specializes in tree safety, health, and protection. And some of our accomplishments from last year, the accessory dwelling unit coastal zone ordinance update was adopted by the board and certified by the California Coastal Commission. Our local hazard mitigation plan was approved by the Board of Supervisors in November of 2021. And this was a plan for the reduction of risk from natural and man-made hazards. And the plan adoption makes the county eligible for federal disaster aid funding. The density bonus ordinance on the Bay side that incentivizes affordable housing through exceptions to development standards. And this was an update to reflect changes in state law. And additionally, we were awarded a grant from the San Mateo County Transportation Authority for Connect the Coast Side and moving forward with next steps. So I want to go over some of our state mandated programs and some of the timelines here. We have the accessory dwelling unit permit streamlining, and this is an internal process and improvements for the ministerial approval of standalone detached and attached ADUs and JADUs. JADUs meaning junior accessory dwelling units, to meet state mandated processing deadlines. And so we're currently working on some internal processes for staff and should be finished in the next couple of months. SB 9 guidance and implementation. SB 9 is known as the Housing and Opportunity and More Efficiency Home Act, and that was effective January 1st of 2022. So this is new as of last year and effective this year. And I believe Will had given you a presentation on SB 9, and this is the duplex and urban lot provision law that allows for on single family zone lots in urban areas up to 2 primary units on the lot without a lot split, and the option to do 1 lot split into 2 lots and then develop each of those lots. So here we're working on some internal guidance and processing for staff. And we also have a website for the public, and we're currently updating some of that information. We will continue updating as needed, given that this law is new and still being interpreted. And we also expect the State Housing and Community Development Department to provide additional guidance this year. Our SB 35 and SB 330 guidance. The SB 35 it applies to housing projects that propose at least 10% affordable units in residential or residentially zoned mixed use outside of the coastal zone with some other criteria met. And they must be considered ministerially using objective criteria. SB 330 is a state law that limits the number of public hearings to 5 for certain housing projects like SB 35. And this basically increases or reduces our permit processing time as well. So we're finalizing some internal documentation and processes for staff to implement this as well as the SB 9 and SB 330. Our community climate action plan. We are currently working with the Office of Sustainability to update the 2013 Energy Efficiency Climate Action Plan. And it was a focus of the update climate action plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, targeting a 40% below 1990 level by year 2030. And this was as a result of the Senate Bill SB 350 that was signed into law in 2015. So the draft general plan element and implementing community climate action plan are expected to be before your commission and the board this summer. On the transportation side, CEQA thresholds of significance. SB 743 changed the way that transportation impacts are measured under the California Environmental Quality Act from levels of service to vehicle miles traveled. So levels of service being the traffic delay and motorist experiences at intersections, instead of looking at the added vehicle miles associated with a new building or road construction. So the county is currently using an interim vehicle miles traveled threshold that the Department of Public Works has for evaluating transportation impacts. And we're currently collaborating with Public Works to review the state's guidance and establish exemption criteria, thresholds of significance, and potential mitigation measures for review of projects when they're subject to a CEQA analysis. Essentially, initial study, mitigated negative declaration, EIRs, things of that nature. The traffic impact analysis requirements is in addition to the CEQA thresholds of significance, but not necessarily linked to projects that are reviewed under CEQA. So the traffic impact analysis is also a collaboration with Public Works on identifying when a traffic impact analysis report is required of a developer. For example, if the development would generate more than 100 average daily trips, we would require a report, or Public Works would require a report, as well as identification of mitigation measures. So we're taking the TIA that we currently have and taking a closer look at it, given the changes in state law for CEQA, and expanding and making sure that we have some identification of traffic analysis requirements, whether or not a development is subject to an environmental study. And our local hazard mitigation plan implementation, now that the LHMP is adopted, and that was adopted last year by the board, we're pivoting to implementation. So during the local hazard mitigation plan process, it was identified that we lacked updated and comprehensive data on building and population density as it relates to exposure to hazard risks. So when it's completed, we're working on the GIS risk data tool that will give us the ability to identify hazard exposures and to track historical hazard events and to map future hazard events. There will be additional implementation and action items from the local hazard mitigation plan, but this is our first step in creating this tool. And then we'll identify the subsequent action plans, action items identified in the plan to move forward. In our safety element update, this is the update to the general plan natural and man-made hazards policies and goals to reduce the risk of death, injury, property damage from earthquakes, floods, and fires. And this is a requirement of Senate Bill 379 that we update our safety element once we have updated our local hazard mitigation plan. So this is the next step in the LHMP implementation as well. And this will also incorporate some climate adaptation and resiliency strategies. And we're currently exploring a multi-jurisdictional effort similar to how the LHMP was carried out. That was a multi-jurisdictional effort. We're working with 21 elements, and they've reached out to other jurisdictions to see what other cities and counties may have interest in moving forward on the safety element as a group. And the next item program that we have is the environmental justice general plan element. And some of this work that's required by state law may overlap with the work being done with the safety element and housing element. So we are flagging some of the work here as we move forward with the safety element and housing element, and also exploring very early on the potential for a multi-jurisdictional approach to this element. This is on hold for the moment, seeing if we can leverage some of the work that we're doing as part of the other general plan elements, and then we will move forward with this one. Our stormwater ordinance and drainage manual, which is phase 2 of the green infrastructure plan. This is the update to the ordinance and the manual to reflect changes in state law. And at this point, the state is updating the municipal regional stormwater permit. They are holding their adoption hearings at the state level in April. And if it's approved with the changes that they have made, it would be effective in July, I believe. And so what we're trying to do is sync with the state. And once they have their municipal regional stormwater permit, which the county operates under, we will then take our stormwater ordinance and drainage manual and start moving that forward again for changes in the state law to be consistent with them. So we currently have this on our plan to move forward with in May, with the expectation that the MRP at the state level be adopted in the coming months. And then finally for this slide, the child care ordinance. This was approved by the Board of Supervisors, and we've sent it off to the Coastal Commission for certification. So we're going through their process at the moment. The next slide is all related to housing and housing element that I won't go into detail here, since Will gave a great presentation on the status and what we're doing to move forward. And just the takeaway is that we are working on the housing element update with the Department of Housing. And in addition to that, we are also implementing the current housing element. So working to move forward with those requirements as well as updating for the next cycle. And to go over some of the county programs and projects. The Connect the Coast Side plan, we are in the final stretch of this plan and anticipate bringing the plan before your commission and the board by spring or summer of this year. Following that, we will shift into kind of implementation mode of that, assuming that the plan is approved. We had the opportunity to apply for a grant to begin the next steps with Connect the Coast Side, again, assuming the plan's approved. The awarded grant will aid the county in moving forward with the Caltrans process to explore infrastructure design and alternatives, costs, and potential impacts. This process will also identify the type of environmental document needed to move forward with the next steps in that Caltrans process subsequent to this one that we're currently undertaking. So we anticipate the first step with Caltrans and the Transportation Authority to take approximately 18 months. And after that, then we'll move into the next, which is the environmental review with Caltrans. And that will probably also take another year to 18 months. The North Fair Oaks Community Rezone Phase 4. We have hired a consultant to begin work on this rezone. And this is in line with the vision of the community plan, and it will expand some of the mixed-use development areas and opportunities along Huntington and Blenheim only. The rezone is in the very early stages, but we are focused on inclusive engagement. We partnered with a consultant as well as the Peninsula Conflict Resolution Center and Nuestra Casa to help with the outreach. And of course, we'll coordinate with the Office of Community Affairs and others. The protected tree ordinance update. We are working on the revised ordinance. Work on this has restarted. And we're currently looking at certainly incorporating the permit exemptions that we currently have for the hazardous tree removal. This was the 1-year exemption in collaboration with CAL FIRE. We are revisiting the fines associated with unpermitted removal, particularly regarding developer removal versus a landowner's removal. We're taking a look at that and also trying to outline and streamline some of the processes in what will be the protected tree ordinance. It'll be a combination of significant and heritage tree ordinance into one. We are also currently drafting a companion guidebook to go along with the ordinance for property owners and giving them some guidance. The commercial cannabis ordinance update is also a new addition in 2021. We are streamlining the licensing processes as well as some other minor administrative changes. We anticipate the release of the environmental document and the public hearings in the next coming months, going to the Board of Supervisors for the minor changes. And we are working with some of the cannabis licensees in the county to assist us with some of the issues that they had faced in going through the licensing process and trying to streamline some of the requirements. Plan Princeton, we have just restarted work on Plan Princeton this month. We're currently working on reviewing the zoning updates draft for regulations consistency, and then we will focus on the draft shoreline management plan. We'll have outreach to internal departments, to the technical advisory committee and steering committee, as well as One Shoreline and the Coastal Commission before we start moving forward with those drafts. The North Fair Oaks Bike and Pedestrian Crossing Study. This study is being led by Office of Sustainability to explore the feasibility of a grade separated railroad crossing in North Fair Oaks, possibly around Westmoreland and Pacific, or Westmoreland and Berkshire. The study is in its very early stages, and we're participating with Office of Sustainability and others to see what might be feasible, if anything. And the local roadway safety plan, we are also participating in this effort with Public Works and others to identify safety needs on county-owned and maintained roads using collision data, local experience, traffic violations, maintenance logs, and then to implement some solutions to such as education and enforcement, capital projects, and maintenance work. So Public Works is leading this effort on the roads to look at the roads either in whole or portions thereof. And the Department Racial Equity Toolkit, alongside the county-wide racial and social equity efforts, the department is in the process of creating a department-level racial equity toolkit to bring staff awareness to opportunities in advancing racial equity in our programs and policies. So this will serve as a checklist for staff before we embark on new programs and projects to make sure that we are being inclusive of all communities and making sure that we're making our best attempt to ensure that the programs and projects that we embark on don't adversely impact communities and peoples in our communities. On the transportation demand management ordinance, our current ordinance speaks to how the county mitigates its own VMT, vehicle miles traveled, for county employees. But it doesn't really speak to how developers need to mitigate for traffic, transportation impacts. So we're working to update this transportation demand management ordinance to be broader. And the City and County Association of Governments, CCAG, that oversees the congestion management program, is providing some guidance. They have a launch kickoff this week that we'll attend, and we'll look into possible mitigation fees, what departments or entities would or could be responsible for running programs such as developer transportation management funds, transit subsidies, whether or not development has flex time available for its employees or secure bike storage, things of that nature. So we're looking at working with Public Works on updating our ordinance. The Pescadero Fire Station and County Service Area 11 Waterline Extension. This is new on the long-range planning side, but this is already a project that is underway. It's a collaborative effort with the county's, CMO's office and other departments in the county, along with the State Water Board and the La Honda Pescadero Unified School District, and of course, County Fire, CAL FIRE. We're looking to do a local coastal program amendment to replace Fire Station 59, which is in Pescadero on Pescadero Creek Road, and to relocate and create a new fire station on the La Honda Pescadero Unified School District property. In addition to that, extending CSA 11 water service to the school. The school has currently exceeded its water quality standards along with, and has received some citations from the State Water Board. And so we're trying to assist the school in providing potable water through extension of the water line, and also to serve the fire station and to provide a new fire station for County Fire. Detached accessory structure ordinance update. This was a project that we had postponed, and we're anticipating restarting this in July of 2022. This is essentially a consolidation of administrative policies and some of our zoning regulations related to detached accessory buildings and structures. It's more of an administrative putting together of a lot of parts into one ordinance that's easier to find information, particularly for landowners as well as staff. And we do have a couple of postponed county programs and projects. Unfortunately, due to some changes in staffing, we have postponed the COSI design review regulations demonstration of scale and the height limit, as well as the commercial, the C1 updates, and the zoning ordinance reorganization. And with that, we are hiring new staff and hope to be fully staffed in the next couple of months. And as the new staff come up to speed, we'll look to see how we might be able to shift some projects to more junior staff to free up possibly more experienced staff to continue processing these. But for the moment, they are postponed. And then I'll just briefly go over some of our ongoing programs and projects. The ongoing support that we have, that staff resources is devoted to. We have the ADU amnesty program on the base side that we're continuing implementation on. Our department is continuing to review outside agency environmental documents as they come in. We have a community-based transportation plans update the North and South County for urban areas. That is a joint effort with CCAG that we continue to participate on the El Camino Real Grand Boulevard initiative as well. As general plan conformity requests and harbor industrial area annexation requests come in, we will review those as needed. We do still staff the Home for All initiative, and will continue to do so. The housing element update and implementation, as Will had mentioned in his presentation, that is continuing. Middlefield Junction mixed-use redevelopment master plan and development. We will participate there as that project is in its first stage and under construction. We'll continue participating with housing and other departments as needed, and the transportation working group as well. And that's a participation with Office of Sustainability to make sure that we're all on the same page on what needs to move forward with transportation in the county. And kind of our future programs and updates, skipping over the title slide, but some of the things that we still have on our to-do list is updating our grading regulations, ordinance, short-term rental on the Bayside, parking regulations, infrastructure finance district in North Fair Oaks, other general plan sections, section updates as needed, confined animal regulations, our local coastal program updates to address sea level rise, and any board of supervisors initiatives that come forth over the course of the year or so. So that is a hopefully relatively brief, but still a little detailed overview of our programs and policies. And I welcome any comments or questions.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. Yeah, I'll call on Commissioner Ketchup. Any comments?
Thank you. So thank you for the presentation. On the slides, I assume the date there is the anticipated finish date?
That's correct.
Okay. So on the tree ordinance, will the temporary fire hazard significant tree removal permit that ends in July, will that be extended until this new ordinance is complete?
Yeah, we are working on extending that and building that into the ordinance permanently. But I believe Steve Monowitz, is the director, is working on extending that with a memo soon.
Okay, on Plan Princeton. So the table showed this pretty much out to the end of the 2 years. Could you give a more specific timeline on the tasks that need to be completed? With this, it's been to the on the public front, this has been on hold since 2015. So
yeah, I have some additional information that I had provided on the spreadsheet, and it has been something that has languished for a bit, and most of that is because of staffing and resources, the availability of staffing. So we do anticipate that after our review of what has been drafted and the outreach to the technical advisory committee and steering committee, we will need to do an environmental review of that. And then we will do community engagement on the draft and do the outreach on the draft shoreline management plan, as well as the zoning updates. So we will be going out to the community for that, Midcoast Community Council. And then we will need to go to the advisory committees and come to your commission, and then the board and coastal commission.
So the anticipated completion date is really winter 2023. So a year or 2 years? I'm sorry, I just winter means the start of the year, correct?
I think we're hoping to have the majority of the work done by the end of 2023, but it may extend into the beginning of 2023, June, January or February. But hoping to keep it moving so that we can get the majority of the work done by the end of next year.
Okay. And lastly, under future, the LCP update to address sea level rise. This has been on the to-do list since 2019. And what year do you anticipate this will actually begin?
So we're hoping to do some of the work and research as part of the safety element update. And I know that Office of Sustainability is also working on the South Coast sea level rise vulnerability study. So what we are trying to do is leverage the information that is going to come from those studies and that work, and then see what additional work we're going to need and what LCP updates we need to amend. The safety element will probably take a year. The Office of Sustainability's efforts, I'm unsure of what their timeline is. But if we become fully staffed and along with those element updates, we'll see if we can build in the LCP amendment as well, knowing that we can only submit 3 LCP amendments to the Coastal Commission per year. They can be bundled, but be sensitive to that, as well as having a maximum of general plan updates. So long way around it. As the safety element progresses and the Office of Sustainability's efforts move forward, we'll see at what time we can build in the LCP amendments for the sea level rise, because I know that this is also something that has languished for some time.
So it can begin during this 2-year time frame of the table. It's not going to be not even discussed until 2 years hence. Is that what you're saying?
I think we'll probably take a look at it this year as the safety element moves forward. I don't know if we'll be able to have it completed by the end of this year. Certainly, we can take a look at it and see if we can either get it started this year or in the next year.
Okay, so in one sense, it could have been in the table for the current project, but it's not officially in that portion. So, and we're not, in other words, are we waiting for the completion of Plan Princeton, or does that not have to happen?
It may inform the LCP amendments needed. So we'll take all of it into consideration and see when the best time is to move forward with this. I'd like to continue to move forward and getting the LCP amendments updated, but I also know there's a couple other moving parts, and I have to be sensitive to staff resources as well.
Okay, as time goes by, we get applications for building on the shoreline, and our current LCP has the antiquated 50-year timeline, and Half Moon Bay has already updated their LCP, and they have the 100-year that the Coastal Commission recommends. So it is sort of some importance anyway to me to get that done. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Commissioner Hanson, any questions?
Thank you, Melissa. What I really liked was the spreadsheet had links to other documents that I could go and review. And that really answered a lot of my questions. The one that didn't have any links was the safety element. So what's really happening with making us a fire safe community? And what, if any, is a timeline on that?
So the safety element will take a look at the wildfire risks. And I believe at the state level, there is an effort kicking off, either has or will, on evacuation routes at the CAL FIRE level. We are working with the Department of Emergency Management as well on evacuation routes as well as wildfire, and those will be policies and goals that we will take into consideration as we start the safety element. It really is just in the early stages at the moment, but that will be a part of it, and we will outreach to other departments, of course.
What I'm also specifically looking for is not just evacuation, but when we do, let's say, new development, having things cleared out 100 feet from the house, make sure things are not stored that are flammable next to the house, make sure that dead trees and bushes are removed, that tree limbs are trimmed up to 6 feet, particularly in denser areas like La Honda, Skylon, those areas. make it a fire-safe community. I've seen it being done in other areas, and I was wondering what, if any, plans we got going to protect ourselves.
Yeah, I think, like I said, some of that's going to be built into the safety element. I know that CAL FIRE and other fire jurisdictions with the defensible space program that they have, in some instances, you can contact the fire agency and they can go out and do an assessment on your property and help you to identify what might need to be removed or limbed up. I think some of those efforts may be broadened given the wildfires that we've had. Yeah.
So it's passive. Yeah, but maybe we just need to say that you have 5 years to get there, and because you leaving it at risk puts us all at risk. But other than that, I really appreciate the plans. I appreciate being honest and saying these things will not happen. I like knowing that, and we can deal with that. I do like, I think you've been assigned way too much to get things done effectively in a timely manner. That's just my own personal opinion. A lot is being asked to you with the amount of staff you have. I understand that. I don't have no problem setting priorities and saying these we will do and what we won't do. And so thank you for keeping me informed.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gupta.
Thank you for your presentation, Melissa. Very nicely put together spreadsheet here. I concur with Commissioner Hanson. The list of things that you and your staff is working on is just very impressive. Okay, I'll start with question on childcare ordinance. I'm just curious that does that work include like renewal of the permits? What are they required to show these childcare facilities in terms of being able to renew their permits? Is that inclusive as your work?
My understanding is the majority of the ordinance reflects state law that shifted more towards a ministerial approach to childcare centers to bring childcare local and easily accessible for people in the community. So in some instances where we used to require use permits for childcare centers, some of those requirements have been removed so that they are a ministerial process, provided they meet certain criteria in the ordinance. So there's no renewal on our end of some of these childcare centers. The licensing that they have to have under the state requirements still remains, and they would need to follow any applicable renewals with community care licensing or any other state licensing board.
Okay, so they don't come to the county for that.
Correct. The majority of the smaller ones won't. They won't need the use permit.
Okay, unless somebody complains about something. Is that how it works?
If we receive a complaint, we will investigate it to see if there is a violation of the current ordinance. And anyone complaining to our department could also complain to the state if they felt there was a violation at that level too.
Okay, because you keep hearing about things going on at the childcare centers, and parents want to be comfortable while they are at work where they are leaving their child. Okay, thank you. Another question I have is, you had mentioned these tree, I may not be using the right terminology, but this tree removal guidelines, like, are these spelled out somewhere? Because many times people don't even know that they need a permit, like especially homeowners don't even know that they need a permit to remove a tree, right? Or what kind of trees, how big a tree should be before they need to apply for a permit before removing it. So are these guidelines there somewhere? They can easily find it?
So we currently have our webpage for tree removal permits that has both current ordinances, a significant and heritage tree ordinance. What we will do moving forward with the protected tree ordinance that's in draft form is we're going to combine the two ordinances that we currently have into one and provide some processes. In addition to the ordinance, we will have guidance, like a guidebook for property owners. So both of those, once we have them completed and the ordinance adopted by the board, we'll put them on our website. And so they'll be available for the public to use. And we'll see if there are some other ways that we can inform the community on when they might need a permit to remove a tree. Right now it's all on the website, but we'll see what we might be able to explore there to keep the community informed.
Right. Okay, that's great. Because just yesterday I was looking at the website. It's a new website now for the county. Yeah, so I'm still kind of navigating through it, and it may be very good. Maybe at least getting to it is easier now. So that's great. Thank you. And one more question that I have is on this transportation demand management. Is that something that is just for the county? For the unincorporated areas, or is that for the whole county?
Ours for the unincorporated areas, but the cities may have their own transportation demand management ordinance. Our ordinance, though, like I said in the presentation, really is geared more towards the county itself and county employees and how the county provides transit subsidies and passes and bike, lockers for county employees. It doesn't really speak to when a developer comes in and proposes development, how they might provide subsidies for transit or other programs. So we're trying to take a look at it and expand so that it's applicable beyond our own county employee staff. And CCAG is the entity that really has this in their wheelhouse, and they provide a policy, and then it's up to the cities and counties to make a determination on whether or not they need to adopt an ordinance. And so we're looking at their guidance and are going to meet with them this week to see what we can do to make this a more comprehensive ordinance.
Okay. So CCAG is for the cities. Is that
correct? It's a grouping of city and county association of governments.
Okay.
So one larger entity.
Okay. And the unincorporated areas don't fall into that?
They do.
They do.
Okay. They do.
Okay. So maybe that's not the right thing I'm asking, or that's not really my question. My question is, any kind of transportation plans, when we add housing, we need to look at transportation also. So then we cannot just focus on the county. I'm sorry, I keep saying county. We cannot just focus on the unincorporated area. We can't just say, okay, this is the end of unincorporated area, and we don't care what happens outside that. we have to look at the total county. So is that how we work? I'm sure it's done in some manner, but that's my question. How?
Yeah, there is a coordination between the cities and the counties. The ordinances are really, they really speak to the jurisdiction that they're adopted in, but the ordinances are not done in a silo. They're not created in a silo. We outreach to others because, yeah, transportation and traffic impacts does not care if you're in the unincorporated county or a city, right? Similarly to climate change. So we do work with other departments. CCAG is one that kind of overreaches the cities and the county. So we do look at it holistically and create those ordinances as best as we can holistically.
Okay, yeah, okay. Yeah, I was expecting that and you confirmed that, right? Okay. And just one last question is, how is this ADU amnesty program coming along?
Yeah, so we completed the pilot program, and that was really kind of focused in North Fair Oaks for property owners that were interested. They contacted us if they had unpermitted ADUs that they wanted to permit. We, I believe, processed 5 under the amnesty pilot program, and were able to have them go in a direction where they could legalize, fully legalize their ADUs. And so what we're doing is expanding that program, continuing on with that program, and we're just working with our contractor vendor to assist us with that so that we kind of keep some separation between the county and the property owner, because we do want people to come forward if they have unpermitted ADUs and explore the option to go through this amnesty program. But we don't want to discourage them by forcing them to come into the county with the worry that there may be some enforcement action on them. But so what we're doing is working with our contractor, and they're kind of being the point for property owners to come in, and if they feel that an unpermitted ADU can move forward through the amnesty program or through full legalization, then we discuss that with our contractor and then guide the property owner through the process. So it was very positive, and we were able to keep the 5 that contacted us and get their ADUs legalized. And so we're going to move forward with a broader implementation of the program.
Okay, yeah, that sounds like a good plan. And do they count towards our RENA numbers?
I do believe we count them, yes.
Okay, great. Good. Thank you very much, Melissa.
Welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Ross, for answering all of our questions. I don't have any questions. I think everything has been pretty much answered. Especially had the questions about the unpermitted ADUs. But I'm just going to make a comment on this. I think you have a very ambitious agenda ahead of you. And I hope that you get, more help and maybe more money allocated so that you can hire more people to get this thing done, because I think we have a lot of things that are pending that we've been waiting for a while, like Plan Preston. I think Ms. Ketchum would agree that if we can move it a little faster, it would be nicer, but many others. So anyway, with that, I'm just going to say, let's open for public comments at this time. Janet, is there anyone waiting?
Thank you, Chair. We're now opening public comment for item number 4, the long range work plan program. And I do see Ms. Lenny Roberts with her hand raised. So Ms. Roberts, give me a second while I pull up my timer. Let me stop sharing the presentation. Okay, Ms. Roberts, go ahead.
Yes, good morning, commissioners. Lenny Roberts speaking for Green Foothills. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you, and I really appreciate staff bringing this program to the commission every year. It really helps the public as well, kind of like me, figure out how to kind of prepare for what might be coming up in the next year. You do cover an awful lot of different planning issues and planning projects. Hey, I'm sorry, I have to go unlock the door. Just a second. My daughter's at the door and she can't get in. Just a sec. Coming. Unlock the door as well. Let me unlock the bolt. Okay, I'm back. Sorry. I wish I had a little bit more organization to my question, but I'm concerned about SB 9's consequences on such things as heritage trees in people's property, because if by right and without any notification to anybody, somebody can split a parcel and build a second home. I mean, build 2 primary homes plus 2 accessory dwelling units. There will be significant impacts on major landscaping and particularly heritage and significant trees. I'm thinking particularly of the Menlo Oaks area and some other areas where we have historic oaks, and there are other areas as well. So I'm just wondering, how is the county going to be able to ensure protection of significant trees under SB 9? I'm hoping that you're going to actually come up with some specific ordinances, but I have not heard that discussed. And there's other issues as well, because we're going to be increasing impervious surfaces in areas all over the county, unincorporated areas, and thereby increasing potential stormwater runoff. And there may not be adequate areas on a parcel to include the normal stormwater protection requirements that we have now and that are associated with building permits. So maybe Melissa, you could give us some kind of an idea about that. So we may have, and we'll be losing a lot of ecosystem services from people's gardens, and even though many gardens are not as beneficial to insects and birds and wildlife, they still do provide a lot of benefits. So we will be losing a lot of areas that are currently important for wildlife, and we will also be losing some of our reduction of the urban heat effect as these trees come out and other landscaping gets converted to development. That's my question.
Do you want an answer now, or do you have more comments?
No, that's all. That's my primary comment.
Okay.
Yeah, if staff would like to provide any answer, I know Will Gibson also may have some comments on that,
Sure.
but I'm certainly hoping that the county, I know that Will and previously has said that you're working on some internal work, and I hope it is going to involve some input from the public about how to attenuate the impacts of SB 9.
Correct. Yeah. Well, thank you, Ms. Roberts, for your participation. Janet, is there anyone else?
I do not see anybody else with their hand raised, but I wasn't sure if we wanted to give Ms. Janice Davis the last opportunity to raise her hand and see if her microphone.
Oh,
was working.
yes, please. Yeah, if she's still there, yeah, she should be able to come in.
Ms. Davis, if you raise your hand, if you would like to speak, let us know. We'll transfer you over to our panelist. Here, let me try. We try one last attempt.
Yeah.
Alright. Okay, doesn't seem to be moving her over, so she may not be on the line any longer.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, so is there anyone else there?
no, that's all.
Okay. Well, with that, then I'm going to say that I will close public participation at this time unless there's an objection. And with that, I'm going to, Mrs. Ross, can you maybe make a comment with regards to Mrs. Roberts said?
Yeah, so the SB 9 that has the two provisions of a duplex provision where you can have one lot and put two primary units on it, or you can do an urban lot split and take one parcel and split it into two and then develop that. The what's removed from SB 9 is public noticing and public hearings and appealing a decision. So the public aspect of these developments are removed by state law, but we still have to follow, and a developer or a property owner still has to follow the processes. So if someone were to come in for a lot split, they still need to apply for a subdivision.
Mhm.
They still need to meet the requirements, the objective criteria that are in our subdivision ordinance, and go through a process for approval or potentially a denial. So the process is not removed. We still review and reroute out to other agencies to make sure that the objective criteria that they may have also is also being met with that development. I think the issue of stormwater and trees, removal of trees in our current ordinance is subjective, and we cannot use subjective criteria with SB 9 development. And I understand Lenny's concern here with that, because we don't have objective criteria with regards to tree removal necessarily. They're usually removed based on some findings that need to be made. So that is something that we do need to take a look at. The stormwater is also another requirement that we need to take a look at, though there are a little less subjective criteria there, more objective criteria based on square footage, and where we can point to a maximum of impervious surface, we can hold a property owner in that development to those criteria. The law is relatively new. It is still being interpreted. And as I said in the presentation, we are hoping to have some guidance from the state, and we'll take a look at that as we move forward with SB 9. If we do receive projects, I don't believe we have had one yet in to date, but we'll have to go through with them as they come in and see what changes we need to make moving forward. And if we need to put together a policy or ordinance to address some of these, we'll have to do that as we have projects come in. Again, I know that there's some legal challenge on one aspect of the pair of Senate bills. SB 10, I believe, was legally challenged. SB 9, I don't know if that will be challenged. There are some rumors that it may face a legal battle. So over the course of the year, we will see how this shifts and how it changes and how the law is interpreted or maybe amended or challenged, and take steps forward. But very much aware of the impacts to trees, the heat island effect, and stormwater. And unfortunately, the best that I can offer right now is we will see how it goes and make some necessary changes at that point.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for your comment. I think in general, I think you're saying it's like a moving target right now, right? All right. Any additional questions or comments by commissioners? Commissioner Hanson.
No further comments.
Commissioner Gupta.
No, very good presentation.
Okay, Commissioner Ketchum?
We have lot of things going. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing from me.
Okay, or nothing from me either. Thank you very much, Ms. Ross. And I agree, it's a great presentation. Thank you for all the information. And you have your work cut out for you for the next year or so. So thank you. With that, we can now move on to the next item, item number 5, correspondence and other matters.
All right, thanks, Chair Ramirez. I'm reporting that we actually do not have any correspondence or other matters to discuss. So with your permission, I think we can go ahead and move on to item number 6.
Yes, consideration of a study session for next meeting.
Okay, so yeah, no study session planned for our April 13th meeting. We do have one item, it looks like set for the agenda at this point. It would be a consideration of a coastal development permit, non-conforming use permit, and design review for a new home on the coast side in Moss Beach. So that will be on our April 13th agenda at a minimum.
Correct. Great. Is there a director's report?
So for the director's report, I did want to go ahead and remind the commission that we do have some items that you may be interested in that are going to the Board of Supervisors on April 5th. They include the Park Department's off-leash dog pilot program, which was an appeal of the Planning Commission's denial. So that I'm imagining will be of interest to you. We do have an expanded contract with Four Leaf for plan check and inspection services that will be going to the board for approval. As Melissa was mentioning earlier, that is the contract that will include an expanded service for our ADU amnesty program and the ADU streamlining program. So Four Leaf is the vendor that we've been using for those services, and we will continue to, and that their participation in those programs will be expanded. So we're looking forward to that. The third item is the Dinar subdivision appeal. This was a subdivision, I believe in the Sequoia Tract area, that was heard by the Planning Commission on December 8th and was approved by a vote of your commission 4-1 and has been appealed to the board. And that was a general plan amendment subdivision for a, sorry, don't remember the number of units, 6-unit townhouse development on Woodside Road in the Sequoia Tract area.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, and I recommended for approval by your commission and then on to the board. I apologize if I said it was an appeal. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that's it. I did want to, on a note of good news, we've talked throughout the presentations today about the staffing issues that we're experiencing and have been struggling with over the last couple of years. I am pleased to announce that we do have 3 new planners that one of them has just started recently. The 2 additional will be starting in April. So hopefully within the next, and then we have 1 more position that we're hiring to fill. So hopefully within the next couple of months, you'll see some new faces. And as Melissa was saying, we'll be able to have these, there'll be planner 1s and 2s. So more junior level planners, and we're hoping that they'll be able to take over a lot of the work at the counter and on some of our more simple permits and our building plan checks, freeing up our more experienced planners for more complex permits and also for some of the hopefully for some of the long range work that's been languishing. So a little bit of good news there.
Yeah, great. Fantastic news. Yeah. Anything else?
I think that's it.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you very much for the report. Do commissioners have any updates or questions? Anybody? Ms. Ketchum?
No, thanks.
Ms. Gupta? No? Okay. Well, with that-
Chair Ramirez, I did want to just mention real quick, we will reach out to Janet Davis and make sure, yeah, apologies for the technical difficulties, whatever seemed to be the problem. We will definitely reach out to her and make sure that she has an opportunity to provide comments, and we can forward those to you.
Oh,
Yeah, that would be great. I really appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. All right. Well, with that, then we got to item number 9, which is adjournment. At this time, I will adjourn the meeting. So I will see you guys next time. All right. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.